Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, you personally have Bitcoin. Let's get some Bitcoin on the balance sheet for Barstool.
That's I like I said, I literally tried to convince Jay to do it back in the day. It was then I couldn't. I could see us definitely having Bitcoin on the balance sheet in the future.
Are you still? What's going on, guys? K-Dub here with another episode of Crypto Zombie. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a great day today. Now, obviously, I'm just doing this video update to kind of get you ready for what could potentially happen next week. Right now, it is a holiday weekend. We're not having stocks trading on Monday, so I would be shocked if we really saw any major Bitcoin price action until then. But as you can see right here, we are still sitting below the support of this sort of consolidation after we had that fake out pump. And if you look at crypto interest, if you just go on a Google search right now for cryptocurrency as a whole, well, it is kind of falling off a cliff right now. People are losing interest, and a lot of people are saying that, this is not good for crypto. Crypto is, Bitcoin's going to go to these crazy, crazy low levels. Well, I know it's been a lot of doom and gloom on the channel lately. Obviously, the past 3 videos we put out have been very negative. Now, if you've been following my channel for a long time, you'll know that I'm really not a Bitcoin bear, right? Obviously, short term, we have some factors to look at, but what we're not paying attention to is the macro factors at play, that there are so many people that are just completely blind, completely ignoring what's really, truly happening right now. So I want to get into the deep nitty gritty of that specifically and talk about the fact that if you really pay attention and you start connecting these dots, you start to notice patterns and an image begins to form, right? So I want to talk about that while everyone's enjoying their holiday. Hopefully you're having a great time. Also, one of the craziest Gary Gensler theories, not even conspiracies, just one of the craziest Gary Gensler theories I've heard. You got to stick around for this. It's totally out of left field, right? And of course, a lot of people always asking me about altcoins on this channel. We don't really talk about altcoins too much, but actually right now, a lot of people are bored out of their mind, and there is a lot of speculative opportunity. I do trade altcoins. I just don't talk about them on the channel because you know how it goes. You mention something, and then it dumps, and suddenly you're the bad guy, right? But there are some things I'm looking at. If you guys do want to stick around to the end of the video, maybe I'll let you guys know what I'm looking at. But that being said, thank you so much for coming back to the channel. Hope you're having a great day. Let's dive in. Let's have a look. Let's start with Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin, as you guys can see right here, has had multiple tests on this Terra Luna wick. I feel like I do this every time we start the video. But again, you can see right here, look at this. 1, 2, 3, right? So you don't want to hit it too many times to the point where I always use the analogy, you're jumping on a trampoline and then the trampoline gives out and you fall through, right? But what you do want to do is you want to build nice structure. You want to build a nice base, right? So we have to pay attention to that. Now, are we going to end up holding it? Will we end up falling? Well, thus far, it's actually quite crazy how there are a few things historically, for example, like being under the 200 weekly, things of that nature that are pointing towards potentially more bearish price action, right? Some people I've even heard, this looks a bit like maybe like a head and shoulders right here, right? Is that a possibility? Could be, guys. I'm not really a fan of that particular pattern, but nevertheless, from this wick down here, we have actually held this upward sloping trend quite nicely, and we do have the 50 curling up, right? Now the 50, if we go back here, and we were showing you every time you have the 20 and the 50 have the golden flip, which we did have right here, generally you stay bullish for a very long time. It's not common to see it flip and then flip back instantly again, right? Of course, this time could be different. We've had a lot of very different scenarios that have been playing out, but as you guys can see, once we tend to get above it, we tend to hold above it for quite a long time. The only downside right now is that we got rejected off of the 20, right? So the 50 is not only coinciding down here at around the 23,000 500, 24,000, but we also have this right here, support. So we do still have the structure that is holding, right? Of course, some people have mentioned this CME futures gap down at around 20,000. Again, it's sort of iffy. Will we close it? I don't know, because we made the gap while we were closing a previous gap, right? But again, we still have this main upward sloping trend. So I'm not going to keep beating a dead horse. I'm not going to keep talking about the same things over and over and over again. Again, massive VPR support here, 24, insane support at 20K, okay? And, you know, well, you're saying, well, what about if history doesn't repeat, right? That's the big question, right? Everybody wants to hear that bearish scenario. Okay, well, we can toy with that a bit. And, you know, assuming that we get this flip, and then let's say right here, you can see we've never really done that and then started trading under the band, right? You guys can see right here, if we go back, once we trade above it, we stay above this band, right? Go over here. Once we go above it, we stay above this band. Well, right here, you can see we've fallen below the band, right? So again, history is not exactly playing out the way that it normally does. So all you doom and gloomers out there, what is the lowest possible price we could go to? Do I think we're going to go to this price? Personally, no. But what is data showing us? Well, if we have a look at the balanced Bitcoin price, this is a metric, by the way, that was created by David Puel. Okay, if you really want to know, it's a transfer of price, a cumulative sum of coin days destroyed, adjusted by circulating supply and total time since Bitcoin's inception. Basically, in a nutshell, it kind of lets you know where the bottom might be. And you can see that there are a few instances, for example, right here, in which we do fall below it. Okay, right here, we dipped below it again. This very briefly. What's actually crazy is COVID didn't even touch it. That's interesting. That's very interesting. And it didn't fall below it. So you can see right here that we tend to never really ever fall below this ever, right? Are we below it right now? No, we're not. And in fact, these two touches that we had right here, right, when Bitcoin was around 20, and then when we fell down to the lows, right, around that 15.5 area, you could see that we got full on support. So is there a chance we come down and touch it for a third time? Well, remember the last time we did that, it was a black swan, right? So that area, if you were to look at today, what is that price sitting at? It's sitting at around 15,400, okay? So I know, again, you're saying, oh, 15,000, so then there we go. We're going down to that level. Well, again, very rarely do we touch it. We had a triple tap here, right? This was a triple bottom, and then this was a black swan. So we've already had two touches. So if you genuinely, honestly think that we're going to crash, then this is telling us that we shouldn't go any lower than this. And by the way, by the time, you know, Bitcoin even would get down to that level, hypothetically, if you think we're going to that level, I don't. If you do, then yeah, it would be an amazing opportunity to buy. And the closer we are to this level, the better the opportunity is for accumulation and buying. So we've already visited that level 2 times, and we've already moved off of that level. So you let me guys know what you think about that. But let's just look at some statistics right now. Let's try to read between the lines, honestly. In the past 18 months, we've seen a 4x in the amount of large players into Bitcoin, more than we've seen in the past 10 years combined, even though Bitcoin is now 10x more expensive than it was back then. Well, this can obviously come down to the fact that it literally just takes more capital, more money to move it, but we are seeing these large inflows. And if you don't believe that somebody somewhere is paying attention to these ETFs, well, have a look at this. For the first time in history, Bitcoin withdrawals from exchanges have surpassed deposits for 3 consecutive months. I believe it's estimated that there's only about 2 million that are actually liquid at this point. And look at this number absolutely skyrocketing. Oh, and if you don't think the whales are smart, if you don't think the big addresses are smart, how about this right here? Look at what happened, guys. This is where we had the major dip when we crashed down to 15. And look at this. This absolutely skyrocketed right there. Okay, so who are all these whales that are now accumulating wallets more than 10 Bitcoin? 10 Bitcoin's a lot of Bitcoin. Think about it. Many average people do not have 10 Bitcoin. Most people. Even if you have the money for it, most people just don't have 10 Bitcoin, right? And you can see right here, what is that right there? Everybody's panicking, whales accumulating. I mean, come on. It's the writing is on the wall. They know that there's two things, you know, you fear, you FUD, right? You cause FUD in the market, and then you bore them, right? And markets really end in that boredom, right? It's that long, drawn out, I can't take this anymore, I'm just going bored out of my mind. That's what the institutions are looking for. That's what these big whales want. CryptoCon points out, if we have a look, Bitcoin is racing down to realize losses on the 50-day moving average of the RPV ratio. Now, you guys can see right here, there usually are few opportunities for this accumulation. In fact, it usually hits a second point before bouncing, and then it retests the level at the top. Each cycle into the peak, you could see that, well, basically in a nutshell, they're saying that if we repeat what we're doing, that in what we're having right now is actually a bull market fake out. Okay? But hear me out. After that, we usually have Bitcoin making a final visit to the realized loss. This isn't that far away. Bitcoin could get there any day. And that is generally when you see the beginning of the real bull market spark, right? Now, interest over time is absolutely dwindling, right? Cryptocurrency. Absolutely nobody's Googling it right now. Nobody cares. They're into other things. They're into AI or whatever, right? But, I want to give a shout out to Eric Crown. He definitely is one of, he's a good friend of mine, and he's a very good analyst, very good trader. And, he kind of made this tweet, and I really liked it because he said, the GBTC pump has fully retraced. This means bad. Yes, surely you have noticed that the overwhelming majority of all news-based moves, whether up or down, retrace, right? Because trading news events is stupid. That's why I said the other day, I did say that would have been the point to short. It did go higher than that. But again, trading news events is scary, right? But what ended up happening? We got the retrace anyway, right? Probability was in the favor of the retrace. And he says a good example is that you really have to look at what price action is doing, especially during boring times. Example, May 2020, November 2020, there was no news that came out, but Bitcoin rallied from 9,000 to 18,000. Why? Doesn't matter. Price tells the real story. But there's other things that are happening, right? And this is why I don't understand where these bears are pulling these numbers out of, because we had 3 Arrows, we had Terra Luna, we had Celsius, we had FTX, we had the banking contagion, right? All of the Fed hiking, interest rates going up, unemployment kicked up to 3.8%, and yet Bitcoin is still trading above its previous all-time high. What event? What black swan is World War? That's right. What is going to happen that is going to potentially be even harder? Maybe I'm missing something here. I just think that it's that addictiveness. When things are bullish, you get overly bullish, and when things seem bearish, you get overly bearish. But then you can't actually switch to realize the narrative that's out in play right now. And like Joe Consorti points out, he says the Fed is done hiking, even though technically there's still about a 32.6% chance that they may raise one more time. You could see that it always pauses the rate raises when unemployment rises off of its cycle bottoms. Unemployment kicked up to 3.8% when expected was 3.5. So the question is, how long are they going to hold before the cuts? Now, we do know that Powell has still been remaining hawkish. He says he's going to hold it out for a little bit longer. Sure. I mean, we can pause all of 2024, but think about it. Once you pause, it's going to give that opportunity to readjust again, right? I know somebody's yelling, and I can read the comments right now. Someone's saying, yeah, but every time they cut rates, the market tends to dump. Yes, and it usually dumps because the reason that they're cutting the rates is because something has broken, right? Which is what they're aiming for, as nefarious as it may seem. And you might be wondering, well, then why is this still pumping, and how come we had a beautiful bounce off of the DXY? Well, I don't know, guys. It is the weekend. There are a lot of things happening right now, but if you just look at what the world is doing, this is what I'm saying. You got to read between the lines. We have the BRICS nations, right? We have China and Saudi Arabia unloading hundreds of billions of dollars worth of U.S. treasuries. New numbers from the Treasury Department show that China has trimmed its U.S. Treasury from $938 billion to about $835. And then we also have Middle Eastern country Saudi Arabia dropping from $119.2 billion to $108 billion, right? So this just goes back to what Natalie Brunell had said over on Fox about whether or not the entire world is going to eventually be using things like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency.
You believe the entire world will be using crypto, even if it's limited to certain projects? The entire world?
I think the entire world will be using Bitcoin. Why? Because we need a superior form of money.
Would there be enough Bitcoin out there to make it a viable backbone for the entire global financial system?
Well, that's exactly the point, because you know what Bitcoin is immune to? Inflation. And we need a form of money, a superior form of money that's immune to that. Because who benefits from inflation? The rich people, the people who have assets, and the people at the bottom really suffer. And we've never had this bad of wealth concentration since the late 1920s. And money doesn't doesn't really trickle down, but the defaults will trickle up. And I think everyone in this room can agree that at some point that money printer will go burr again. It has to. It's just math. We're too far into debt. And when it does, the bubble will get even bigger. The wealth concentration will get even worse. And thank goodness we have a parallel system through technology that we can peacefully exit into and start accumulating Bitcoin to fix some of these problems and leave behind, demonetize the Fed's monopoly on money.
And again, I tell you, the world is changing, right? You've seen El Salvador putting Bitcoin on their country's balance sheet, having it as legal tender. This is something we only dreamed about just a few years ago. It's so funny how quick we forget, right? All we ever wanted was this, and we got it, right? Same thing for the ETF. It's inevitable. Even like we had RFK Jr. talking about how the Federal Reserve has basically stripped assets away from everybody and really created that gap between the upper and lower, basically abolishing the middle class. I'm not going to play the whole clip. It's a little bit longer. But again, he talks about potentially backing some of these, treasury bills with things like Bitcoin.
With no impact. I'm going to issue a series of treasury notes that are rooted in base currency, including, Bitcoin, silver, gold, platinum, and other base currencies, at least partially, so that Americans will have an option of buying T-bills and borrowing and of obtaining assets that are rooted in base currency, so that they're more of a hedge against inflation. And that will inject discipline into the market. But, we need a lot more than that.
I mean, even just this news that came out of China, I feel like people are sleeping on a bit. Now, no, they didn't legalize crypto or anything like that. And there's a lot of people speculating that China probably won't. They'll probably just continue to run it all through Hong Kong. But nevertheless, cryptocurrency has been a pretty rough subject in China, right? And the government has imposed strict regulations and even outright bans on different aspects of the industry. However, in a recent report from China's People's Court challenges this historical stance, offering newfound recognition of virtual assets as legal property. In a significant departure from conventional policy, the report titled Identification of the Property Attributes of Virtual Currency and Disposal of Property Involved in the Case, that's a heck of a long name, asserts that virtual assets possess economic attributes that categorize them as property. So even though China is still not lifting their crypto ban, they are saying that cryptos are considered property. This is insane. This is massive. Could they end up reversing the ban? Well, a lot of people think they're not going to do that, but it's just funny how you just keep seeing all these guys. BlackRock a few years ago, right? Wouldn't touch Bitcoin with a 10-foot pole. It's just used for nefarious purposes and has no real value. Look what happened. Trump saying that, cryptocurrencies have nothing, they're thin air, and then he releases an NFT project, right? It's so funny how you see these guys coming around to it. And this has to be one of the craziest not conspiracies, it's just a theory. It's a funny theory. I almost think it's a joke. But listen to this. I'm not going to read all of this, but you have Zach G over on Twitter, and he says that Gary Gensler is actually a secret Bitcoin maximalist. And that's why he wants all the other cryptos to be securities and why he keeps delaying the ETF. So now he's trying to flip it, saying that Gary is on our side. I don't know. That would be crazy. Talks about him in MIT, his fascination with Bitcoin. Remember, he did all those original lectures. We've posted them multiple times on the channel. So now that he rose to power, they're saying that he's not obstructing progress. He's ensuring that individuals have a fair chance to accumulate Bitcoin before institutions dominate the market. Gary knows that institutions could flood the market if an ETF were approved, driving up Bitcoin's price. By delaying the ETF approval, he's providing a window of opportunity for retail investors to accumulate Bitcoin at more accessible prices, preserving the democratic and decentralized nature of Bitcoin. So there we go. There's our answer, guys. Gary's actually on our side. He's a Bitcoin maxi. He wants Bitcoin to thrive, and he wants to give us all opportunities to accumulate Bitcoin before the big guys. I can't wait to hear some of the comments below on this one. I'm pretty sure that's not the reason. But that was an excellent theory, and I do have to give some credit where credit is due. But I do want to end on the fact that, talking about Bitcoin adoption, we do in fact have Colorado's Department of Motor Vehicles now accepting Bitcoin payments.
Colorado's DMV says they want to be innovative and convenient, so now they're letting you use cryptocurrency to pay for some services.
That's the first thing that people ask for when they think of how do we improve the DMV, yeah. Right? Crypto, yeah. It can be used to renew your driver's license or vehicle registration. The state DMV is going to let you use it as an online payment through PayPal. Can't use crypto there in person at the counter. The DMV says they're trying to find ways to leverage technology to offer services.
So that's it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel. Of course, be safe out there. You know, like I said, I don't prefer talking about altcoins, but there are opportunities. Unfortunately, most people just end up holding for too long and, you know, then they get mad. But what I recommend personally is if you want to really do altcoin trading, kind of wait until you get the trend, the full season. It's a lot easier, right, to buy those picks. And my second thing is just honestly practice trading. Over on CoinCatch, you know, they have no KYC up to $10,000 bonus and $100,000 withdrawals. With all the KYC that's going on, it's getting harder and harder to find these types of exchanges. But, you know, you can set up a paper account, you can trade with fake money while you're learning, and then that way you can set yourself up to be self-sufficient and you're not trying to worry about these altcoins that are pumping or what is the team doing or did they dump or is it a scam, right? You know Bitcoin's not a scam, right? So if you just teach yourself the ability to trade and to sort of control your own destiny, I suppose, when it comes to hedging, you know, or dollar cost averaging. But anyway, if you guys are interested, I feel like I've gone on way too long on this episode. Check out CoinCatch below. That is in the description. But ultimately, like I said, that's it for me. Hope you have a wonderful and beautiful day today. The Bears are out in full play, but I am not fooled. I see through it. I know what's happening. I don't care. Maybe we go sideways for a couple more months. I mean, whatever. More opportunity for accumulation, right? So that's it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel. Hope you're enjoying your holiday weekend. If you do want to check out these tutorials popping up right here, right now. Until next time, stay crypto. And of course, peace out.